This is the quadratic formula. This is a very, very important formula that you need to write down in your notes because you're going to use it constantly. What the quadratic formula tells you is what are the intercepts on the x-axis. So if we look at a graph, we know that sometimes we can have a U-shaped graph. Remember, we're dealing with quadratic formulas, which all are U-shaped. And you notice that this one has two intercepts. And this quadratic formula here, this plus minus, will give you those two answers. We also can have a quadratic graph that may only have one answer. And that is possible. And you also might have one that will never ever touch. And so there will be no intercepts. So this is what the quadratic will tell us. And just so you know, when you factor something and you're solving it where you have two answers, and I believe we did that in section 1 or 2 of this chapter, you're also finding these intercepts. So if you don't like to factor, you can always use this equation to find what those intercepts are instead of factoring. Okay, so we're going to use an example here. We have 2x squared plus x equals 5. And what you want to do, the very first step, is you want to put this in standard form. So remember, standard form is ax squared plus bx plus c. And in this case, we're going to have equals 0 because we want to find out what the x-intercepts are. So we need to move some of the stuff around. We already have the ax squared plus bx. We just need to move this 5 over to here. So we're going to subtract the 5 on both sides. So now we have 2x squared plus x minus 5. And now it's equal to 0. We're going to use the quadratic formula instead of factoring this. Okay, this is another method of finding the intercepts. Quadratic formula, you need an a b, and a c in order to do that. Okay, so our a is a positive 2. Our b is a 1, and you can fill it in to help you. And our c is a negative 5. Now we have ABC. We just need to rewrite the equation, which I'm going to write it for you so you can see it again. You don't have to do this step. You have it in your notes already. Okay, the quadratic formula was b plus or minus, it's a negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So we need to fill the values in. Okay, so we have a b here, and the b is 1. A is 2. C is negative 5. And A, again, is 2. Now that you have it all filled out, you need to simplify it. I do not suggest putting all of this into a graphing calculator and just calling it good. Calculator is really iffy with the way the parentheses are in there, and it can give you a totally different answer. So I always suggest kind of simplify it on your own first, then you can put it into the calculator to figure it out. All right, I'm actually going to go up here to work on this. We have negative 1 out in front, plus or minus. Let's simplify all of this underneath the square root sign. So we know that 1 squared is 1. We have 1 minus. 4 times 2 is 8. 8 times negative 5 is negative 40. And then on bottom we have 2 times 2, which is 4. Now I can keep going. 1 plus, because 2 negatives make a plus, 40 is 41. And then all over 4. Okay, now when you get to this point, you notice you cannot take the square root of 41 without getting a very large decimal number. So if I asked you to simplify this or find the two solutions, you have this answer right here, is probably fine for me. Now, if I asked you to find the exact value, you would plug in your calculator, -1 plus square root 41. Get your answer, which will be a long decimal number, divided by 4. And I'm actually going to go ahead and do that for you so you see what I'm talking about. So -1 plus square root of 41. You get a long decimal number, and you're going to divide that by 4. And I get, I'm going to just kind of estimate this, 1.35. So there's the first answer. And then you have to go through and do the negative part. So -1 minus the square root of 41 divided by 4. Now I'm going to do -1 minus the square root of 41. Get your answer. And then divide it by 4. And I get -1.85. So this, and remember this is just about, because I'm not writing the entire decimal down. These two are where the graph crosses the x-axis like I showed you. So, you know, right around here and maybe right here. Those are the 2 points of the U-shaped that cross the x-axis. And you just did that without having to factor. Okay, here's another one. This time we need to do some more rearranging. We want it in the form ax squared plus bx plus c. We have the ax squared already over here. We need to subtract the 5x over here. So now we have -1 minus 5 is -6x. And then we need to add the 9 over. So we have plus 9 equals 0. Okay, so now it is in the correct form. Some of you may want to go through and factor, but if I asked you to use the quadratic formula, you would have to actually, use that formula and so on the test. So here we go. We have an A, which equals 1, a B equaling -6, and a C equaling 9. And we use our quadratic formula, which I will rewrite again so you can see where it's coming from. You do not have to rewrite all this. And we fill in the missing pieces. So we have B, which is -6. Notice I put negative B, which is a negative, so I don't have 2 of those there. Oops, sorry. Our A is 1, and our C is 9. 2, and then A was 1. Okay, and again, we're going to simplify this. So 2 negatives will make a +6 on the outside. We have our plus or minus. And let's simplify inside the square root sign. And of course, all of this is under there. -6 squared is 36, positive 36. And now we have 4 times 1, which is 4, and 4 times 9 is 36. And we have that all over 2 times 1, which is 2. 36 minus 36 is 0. And the square root of 0 is just 0. So we don't have to put this plus or minus 0. What's the point of doing that? So really, we have only one answer here, and that is 6 divided by 2, which is 3. So in this case, on a graph, you'd have a U shape that only crosses once, and that would be at 3. So that one I didn't even need to use the calculator. It actually come out pretty decent. And here's another one. So the first step again is to make it in standard form. So we're going to minus the 2 over. And set it equal to 0. We need our A, B, and C values. A would be -1, B is 2, and C is -2. And again, we have the quadratic formula. I'm gonna skip writing this step just for the sake of space. So we have -b, which is 2, plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac. This is all over 2a. Okay, so I plugged all my values in. Now I need to simplify. So I have -2 out in front here. And now underneath the square root sign, we have 2 squared, which is 4. And 4 times -1 is -4. -4, sorry, we have this minus here. I forgot to write that. -4 times -2 is +8. So we have an 8 there. And 2 times -1 is -2. And I'm going to simplify underneath the square root sign even more. 4 minus 8 is -4. And we have -2 on bottom. Now, here is, I'm going to go over here to show more work. Here's where we need to take that imaginary number rule and apply it here, because remember, you cannot have a negative number underneath the square root sign. So we're going to change this, and we're going to pull out the I, and the square root of 4 stays in there. Okay, now let's keep going, because I know there is a square root of 4. So we now have -2 plus or minus 2i. Now the I is still there because we had an imaginary number. So now this is all over -2, which I can see we have a ton of 2's going on. We're going to simplify that. -2 divided by -2 is 1. And 2 divided by -2 is -1. So we have an a plus bi here, and we have 2 of these. So we have 1 plus -1i, which actually simplifies to 1 minus 1i. And we have 1, minus a -1i, which will simplify to 1 plus 1i. So here is one of the x-intercepts, and here's the other. And there are 2 answers as well. Now what I want you to do is just pause the video for a second, because you do need to write this down in your notes, especially knowing what the discriminant is and what each one of these will tell you. So go ahead and pause the video, and when you're done writing, you can come back to listen to the lecture again. Alright, when we find the discriminant, we're actually only taking this stuff underneath of the square root sign. And that little shortcut is going to tell you how many solutions your graph is going to have. And this is going to tell you how many times, 2 times, 1 times, or are there 2 imaginary times where the graph will cross the x-axis, which I already showed you in the previous problems by doing it the long way. So this is a shortcut. If all of this underneath the square root sign is going to be more than 0, your answer will always have 2 real solutions, meaning there's going to be 2 points on the x and y axis, or the x-axis, that are real numbers. No imaginary stuff going on here. Okay, so there's 2 real solutions. If this number underneath the square root sign equals 0, and we did have one that equals 0, you're only going to have 1 real solution. So in this case, the graph may only touch 1 spot. And if all of this information underneath the square root sign is less than 0, which is the last example I gave you, then you're going to have two imaginary solutions. Again, yes, you will have it cross in two spots, but these are going to have imaginary numbers in it, meaning there's going to be an I involved. So in your book, you're going to have some questions that say, find the discriminant, and then give the number of solutions and type of solutions of that equation. So we're just going to do b squared minus 4ac. We're going to use a shortcut instead of doing the long quadratic equation. So we still need our b. So b equals -6. Our a equals 1. And our c equals 10. Okay, so b squared, a is 1, c is 10. We just need to calculate this out. So we have 36 minus 40. So we have -4. And you look back at the chart, which you have wrote in your notes. Is the answer less than 0? Yes, it is. You go to the one that it matches to, which I'm going to go back here. If it's less than 0, we're going to have two imaginary solutions. So, how many numbers of solutions? We're going to have 2. And the type of solutions, they're imaginary. They're not real. So this is kind of a shortcut. Okay, a second problem over here, same thing. We have our a equaling 1, our b equals -6, and our c equals 9. Now we actually did this problem in the notes already, so and you know what the answers are. So let's use the shortcut to see if it actually works. So b squared, we have -6 squared minus 4ac. Simplify this, and it equals 0. So what happens when you have an answer that equals 0? Well, go back to your notes. When all of this equals 0, then we have one real solution. So the number of solutions we have is 1, and the type would be real. And again, if I flip back to that problem we actually did, which is right here, you can tell we got a 0 under here, and we only come up with one real solution. So this does work.